Hey, I'm Richard Miller with Goldie May, and this is the live genealogy research series. Watch as James Tanner and I, along with invited guests, work through a genealogy problem with no script and no agenda. Maybe you'll learn from the big strategy, maybe you'll learn from the small features in the tools, or maybe you'll just see a better way to do it and you can leave a comment so we can all learn. I hope you find this really helpful. Now, here is the research. Welcome to episode 11. Today, James Tanner has a case for us to look at. So I'll just turn the time over to James and you can take it away.
Okay, let me share my screen here. We're going to be looking at one of my direct line ancestors, my great-great-great-grandmother, Lydia Stewart, and she was married to my great-great-grandfather, of course, who was John Tanner. And among the Tanners, John Tanner is quite famous. And there's actually been a video about his life. It's kind of an interesting situation. And he ended up with 21 children from 3 different wives. Of the 3 wives, they all died. It was in succession. Estimates are into the tens, perhaps now into the hundreds of thousands of descendants of John Tanner due to the number of children that all of his children had. This is an interesting situation because despite, you might say, somewhat historical notoriety, Lydia Stewart has almost no information about her, nothing that really is substantial, except she died. And we know where she was buried. So if we look here at Lydia Stewart here on the FamilySearch.org family tree, we see Lydia Stewart and in birth of 18 November 1783 in New York. And the birth of 1783 has been calculated from the gravestone, but there's also some evidence or some records that show a birth date for her, generally church records. But there's an interesting situation here, and we'll look down here at her family, and we'll see that we have William Stewart, and if we go to her father, we immediately see that this is the end of the line.
Yeah.
And this is very unusual since these people were in New England. They originated in Rhode Island and then migrated to New York. What happened here in New England was that the families, Rhode Island was obviously a very small state. And when they had large families, the older sons in the family got all the property. And so the younger sons were basically on their own. And at that time period, there was quite a substantial movement of people from Rhode Island to New York. And they just moved north up into the mid part of New York State. And the standard portion of this ended up in a place called Bolton, or Bolton's Landing. It's along Lake George in central part of the upper part of New York. But they have resisted almost all efforts over the last 100 years to find these people and identify them with any kind of specificity. So let's look at the usual. In other words, we're going to start with looking through what's available here on Family Search. There's a tax list that lists in the Saratoga district, and then there's a couple of United States Census records that have his name on them, and that's up in Albany and a place called Easton in Albany, New York. Now, in order to understand that, what we really need to do is start with some of the places here, and I'm going to go to the Atlas of Historical County Boundaries, which is part of the Newberry Library. And in the Atlas of and we'll look at New York State and and look at the interactive map, as that's helpful for giving some. And surprisingly, you'll find out that kind of interesting is that the part that we call New York today actually was all this land up to Quebec and over what we call Maine and different place. places. So as you move through, and we're going to look at the earliest date here, it's the birth of William Stewart at 1743. So we'll start about 1717 to see what the land looked like at that time. And I'm going to blow this up for a second. Can you still see that?
Mm-hmm. Yep, looks good.
Okay. And as we zoom in on the state, and it's up where Albany is, and up here we call it the Saratoga Springs, and further north, a little bit further north and east of that is up here is Lake George, where the people ended up. But this was all sort of an unknown boundary back at that time. Nobody really knew where these boundary lines were. The only one that was surveyed and had any surveying at that early date was this eastern boundary of Massachusetts. And then down here. So Massachusetts and on Connecticut. And then we have, if we go over here, then we have Rhode Island, which is, it's almost invisible on this map, but it's here. And there were some counties. We had Ulster County, we had Dutchess County, and New York non-county area down here was Westchester and Orange. Then there were a lot of little counties down in here that Richmond and New York out here and on Long Island, there was Queens, and then Suffolk, which was the one that's you may find very frequently if your people came from New York.
Okay.
So this is sort of the lay of the land. And so when they said she was born by 1764 with the same, if we look at the same map line, we see that basically all that happened is they extended Albany clear up to the border with Canada.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so when you say someone was born in Albany, Canada, in Albany, New York, which means Albany County, New York.
Giant area, like part of Vermont. Yeah.
Does not really help you at all.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, all of Vermont was considered to be part of New York.
Okay.
So it's the kind of thing where the less and less we get more and more kind of indistinct places, and they have not even gotten out into this area of New York. And just kind of a reference, see, here's Niagara Falls and Buffalo, which didn't exist.
It's far out on the frontier. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or not even the frontier. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not even the frontier. The frontier is kind of this here. So the answer is we need to be very, very specific when you start getting into time frames like this. It's really easy when you're doing a family tree to go, one more generation. Oh, these people were born in 1790. Oop, these people were born in 1760. Oop, these people were born in 1730. No. When you get there, you really are going to start to get extremely confused with the names of the people and the locations without starting with the locations and getting those identified.
Okay.
So let's go back a little bit to William Stewart.
James, can I ask you too about on that record that we had open 1790 census? Let's see if you go back to the sources tab.
Oh, yeah.
We had that. I think the third one down was open.
Yeah.
Okay. So on that 1790 census, it says event place Albany, New York, and then event place original Easton, Albany, New York. What's happening there?
Okay. Well, that's where we're going to go right now.
Okay, perfect.
Look at that particular issue, because what we need to do is where were these people? Where were they actually? Albany didn't help us, but where else were they? Well, the name that keeps coming up is Easton in Washington. So we're going to look for Eastern New York. Easton, New York. And it's a town. And if we go to the Wikipedia, it tells us it's a town in southwestern Washington County, now Washington County, and here's Washington County in New York, and it's part of this statistical area. But the history was formed. It was formed in 1789 from Saratoga and Stillwater.
Ah, okay.
Okay, so let's kind of look, and there is a Saratoga County also. Let's go to a map, which is the normal way of doing this, and put in Easton, New York. There's an Easton, Pennsylvania, and Easton, Missouri. That's a very common name. Or, oops, we got Easton, New York. And so, okay. We kind of have to.
It's got more of an outline than a city center.
Yeah.
Is that the?
Yeah, that's all of, apparently.
Okay.
Yeah, there it is, right kind of in the middle. See, there's this thing that's here.
Yeah.
So that's a vague place.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a real place that we can say, okay, so they were in this little town. No, it was this kind of area here. And it takes in, you'll see there's this Saratoga National Historical Park.
Okay.
And it runs up here to a place called Greenwich, if you're not, if you don't say Greenwich. And so you have Greenwich, and just north of that, if we keep going north, we see the river runs around, and a little bit west of it. Oh, well, let me do some directions here. And we're going to end up in a place called Bolton. And we want to know how far it is.
Bolton's the town by Lake George.
Yeah. And that's where John Tanner's family originated. It's in Bolton, right by Lake George. So it was just straight north. And it's about 45 miles, 50 miles. If you're walking, it would take you about a day and a half.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's a good different distance. But this is where all of these people sort of focus in this whole area right here. Now, what's happened with William Stewart? We have this, and he says he's from Easton, which doesn't give us, a specific place yet. And then we have, let's go down here, New York Land Records. This is really the crucial kind of record that we have to look at. And when we look at this land record, I can look at it full screen here. This is indenture. It's an encumbrance on the property. It's actually part of the sale of the property. And it's between William Stewart in the town of Easton County, Washington, and the state of New York, and Amy, his wife. This is the only document in for this particular person right now that tells that his wife's name was Amy. And there's been kind of back and forth speculation about her name. So this kind of brings us up to where I started a few weeks ago, getting into this particular line. It helps. Now, if we go to the subway map, we'll see that we have general New York, but across here, everything is Greenwich.
All the children's births.
See, everybody's born in Greenwich, and then you come down here, and then they're in Bolton, and they're actually end up there in Bolton. The children do.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's focused more on Greenwich than it is on anything else. Well, so I began to look at Greenwich because that was the next place. You'll notice here I'm not following names. I haven't done any searches on Family Search or any place else for a name. I'm basically looking for the locations and trying to find out where these people are. Why would I do that? The key question, why would you do that? The answer is, when you focus on names, you're going to start floating off into this vast sea of names. And when you
tons of William Stewarts and Lydias,
you're going to find William Stewart is a very common name.
Yeah.
At this time, and it's spelled two different ways: Stewart and Stuart. I can the painter's steward, and so there's lots of different possibilities here. The key that we have to start with, of course, is that we have William with a wife named Amy, which separates out all the other stewards. And if we go clear down to the end of the document, I think it might be on the other page. It might be needed to go to the next one. No, it's not gonna click for me. But basically, if you look around on all the documents, you'll find that what you eventually find is that the people who signed as witnesses and were involved in the sales are somehow related to these people. Not all, but sometimes they are. Another thing you might be good to remember is that when you see something like this with all the uniform handwriting and all the beautiful signatures and everything, that's because this is a copy of the deeds. This is a deed book where the original deeds, the ones they were writing out and signing, have been copied into this book for preservation purposes. They're not. This is not the original deed.
It's pre-Xerox, so the family took the deed home or the bank or something, and then this is the copy of.
Yeah, they had to have it. They still had the same process back then. That had to be, in our jargon, it would have to be recorded in the recorder's office. But in their time, they had to enter it into the town record and the deed records in that particular county, whatever county it was.
Okay. And James, if I could just pause or just ask a kind of parenthetical question. If you were the one to find this record, how did you find it? Was this, you were looking in New York land records and you had to browse through those 432 images, or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Yep.
The only other way would be if you happen to go up to the first part of this record up here and open it up to see if they have at the beginning of the record, and let's try the end of this record. Well, in this particular case, whoever found this, not me personally, but because this happened to be where the starting point most recently. So someone had to go through this
browsed
page by
page. Yeah.
Yeah. Just went through page by page looking for a deed for William. And there may be more. And that's the key here, is that what I'm seeing is this other stuff is, well, maybe this is William, it's Stewart here and Stewart here. And, maybe this is all him, but, and they're consistent being in Easton. So we can say, well, yeah, but this is the clincher. This is the one that says, yes, he was actually there in that place, his family. And then there's some discussion going on here online about whether he was born in Massachusetts and was the husband of another person, Elizabeth White, and died in New Hampshire in 1771, and so forth and so forth, and the husband that died in Greenwich. So the question is, who is this person? Now, what did you do to do that? Let's go back to the details here. So the next thing you want to know is, where were these people? And we get some questions about where they died. Now, if we go back to the sources, we see that there's a find a grave index, and it says that there's a burial in Greenwich, Washington County, and he was 86 years old. And here's his birthday calculated from the death, and a death date, and he is in the Botskill Baptist Church Cemetery. Well, what happened is I picked up on that. And I thought, I wonder why nobody's bothered to look at the Botskill Cemetery. And so I went to, back to good old Google and go to Botskill and Baptist Church records, Bobcast Baptist Church. Um, by the way, it's still going.
Incredible.
1767 to 2017. Well, actually, later. They didn't stop. And here's a
Yeah.
picture of the church. So this church has been there all along. So all of us, though, I go, well, okay, folks, where do we go for this? These people were Baptists. And if they were Baptist, if they were uh, died in the and were buried in a Baptist cemetery, then they were definitely members of a Baptist church.
Mhm.
Well, we happened, by the way, when because I've been doing research on the Tanners and all of these other families that are around that area for a long time. That all that said was, yeah, they're Baptist because yes, all the other people are Baptist too. The Tanners, everybody were
It's a
Baptist.
very consistent story here.
Yeah, because they're coming out of Rhode Island and they were all Baptists and the Protestant Baptists out of Rhode Island.
Hmm.
And there were different kinds of Baptists, and there's all different kinds of come. The original ones were what are called Seventh-day Baptists, and they came out of England as Seventh-day Baptists, and that's kind of the underlying thing. Unfortunately, the Baptists, the Seventh-day Baptists, and particularly in Rhode Island, were not that great in keeping any kind of records.
Hmm.
So you don't have you don't have any kind of baptism or death or anything. All you get when you get back in Rhode Island is membership records with lists of names.
I see.
But here we have all of these different Baptist church things. And what we want to know is, are there any records that show us or tell us? And we wanted to see if there were the burial records. So Baptist Church Cemetery. Now you might notice that I am using Google to search on Family Search, and that's kind of a shortcut that you might want to note and use because almost everything except live people and some other parts of the website are searchable by Google.
So you
So
could
it
have gone into
may,
the Family Search catalog, but instead it's quite convenient to just add the word Family Search and
yeah,
you see it right at the
yeah, just
top.
add the
Yeah.
yeah, and then you're there. So here you go,
Hmm.
and here's the listing of all the people in the cemetery. It comes from Tombstone's Inscriptions by Wade. It's actually a book.
Hmm.
And if you keep looking, you'll find it. I have it now. I think it's set up as a, yeah, probably these right here, probably on Ancestry too. So if we can jump to the, no, okay, that's not going to help us, but here's the listing of all of the grave markers. And if we look down here for there, okay, so now we see in memory of William Stewart, who died August 5th, 1826, age 83 years, 9 months, and 17 days. That's on his grave marker. And then we have Amy Stewart, wife, who died February 1839 in her 90th year.
So
So
great that it mentioned the relationship to William Stewart right there.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so we placed, this is a record that I found recently. So this places William Stewart and Amy Stewart together in Botskill, at the Botskill Cemetery. You'll notice the Botskill Cemetery is in Greenwich, Washington County. The question here is, well, what was the county at the time? Because Washington County, and that's where my list gives me a little bit of, I can do that here because I know it's on here. Now, if I had used Goldie May since the beginning, I would have all this on Goldie May and I wouldn't have to find pieces of paper and keep trying to juggle paper here. November formation of Albany was 1683. So that's when we go to the Stuarts, that's a long time before them. See? So they were in the mid to early 1800s. And so we're a long way from Albany County. So we don't have to worry about the fact if it's Albany. The question is, what about Washington County? And so here in 1784, you find out that Charlotte County was renamed Washington County, and Charlotte County was formed in 1772. So when you look at a birth date for William in 1740, he had to be born someplace else because he's long before even this was organized. And the first settlers in Greenwich were in 1763. So his birth predates the formation of Greenwich. What is that? When they say the formation, the first settlers got there. There's forest before that. It's nothing. So you don't say, well, maybe they were the early people. No, this is when the first people got there.
This was the first. Okay.
So you're basically sort of in that range. And then Charlotte County was 1772, which was basically the county that took it out of the original Albany County. So this by 17, so his death date by 1826, he definitely it could have been in Charlotte County, but Charlotte County was renamed in 1784. So Washington County's been there, and that's correct. Greenwich was in Washington County by the time these people died in 1826.
Okay.
So why is that important to know? Because if you're going to go look for records, you want to make sure you're looking in the right county.
So you're starting with what you know, which in this case is the most recent thing is his death, and that the places line up there. But then as you go back, we're going to be in a territory that's not. He couldn't have lived in that territory, that area, his whole life.
And what you need to know, and you need to know that Bolton was created in 1799. So we're going to come back to that date in just a couple of minutes here, because we're going to find out that there's some other things going on. Okay, but what else is important about this cemetery record here with the Stuarts? Sorry, I have to get back down again.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Here's this clincher. If you come down to the next entry, it said Sidney, son of William and Amy Stuart, died January 15th, 1814, age 10 months, 14 days. And so when you go back up to William and we look at his family, then we see what?
We're looking for a 10-month-old, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't.
And his name is Sidney.
Yeah. So just not on the tree yet, apparently.
Yeah, not here. And we have Lydia Stewart, basically, who is my direct line. So that's his daughter in 1783. And if we go back to this record, we see that Sidney was born in 1814. And so we want to see where he falls in this list. And he is
much later.
So what's going on here? And see, we're starting to get some really interesting questions. And then here next to it, which is another clincher, you have Willard Tanner, age 9 months, the son of John and Lydia.
Okay, interesting.
So when you go up here to William, there's Lydia.
And then so they had a son that died as an infant.
And if we go up here to Lydia Stewart, and she's the wife of John Tanner, And then we go down through, and there's Willard, 1807. Go to the cemetery, Willard, 1807. And so what are we seeing here? Well, we're seeing that Willard Tanner, the son of Lydia and John, was buried in the same cemetery, the Botskill Baptist Church Cemetery in Greenwich, New York, as the son of William and Amy, and also as William and Amy, who were Lydia Tanner's parents. And that was in 1807. So now we need to go back and look at the Tanners and see what we've got going here. We have William, who's born and says he's born in Greenwich. Matilda, Willard, Sidney, Greenwich. John Joshua, Greenwich. Romelia, Nathan. See, here's the whole Tanner born in that town. So what does that tell us? It tells us that we should be looking for records in Greenwich. Period. End of story.
Okay. Yeah.
And just kind of to sum it up, because we're basically out of time here, is that the next step here is to go to the sources, and the one sources that we need to look at are a lot of other things here, that some of which there's 37 sources here for Lydia. And there's also a lot of other records. Some of them confirm the names of William and Amy, but the last name, surname for Amy is still a little bit of, there's still controversy. We still don't know if her name was Hutt. And the other thing that we don't know is, well, if William died in that town, then we should have a source for a probate record. And since we know it's Washington County, we can go to Family Search real quickly here. And we can go and say New York, United States, New York. And we can search and go to places within, and then there's Washington County. And we can scroll down and we have probate records. And there's all these probate records.
Okay.
And the time frame here includes William. But the problem is that when you click on this, it's actually all this, and a lot of them are not currently haven't been cataloged yet.
Okay.
They've been digitized because all of the records, all the microfilm, this little circle thing is a microfilm icon, and it's available. It says in microfilm at a family history center, and it's not. It's available digitally, but it hasn't been cataloged. And so the other thing you can do is go over here to images and see if it's already been put into the images.
Is it your understanding that when Family Search reached that milestone of digitizing all the film, that all of those images are here in this images section, or is that not true yet?
No,
they're still coming into this images section.
Yeah, look, you can if you pull this out, you can see when these came in. See, these have been in there a long time, 2011.
Okay.
But some of the newer records, in fact, if you go back to the search images and look at the most recent images, available May 24th, June 3rd.
Okay, yeah, so just a few days ago.
Yeah. And there's Queens, New York. And so it's actually New York records that are coming in still. But if we go to New York here, we want to be in New York, United States. Oh, well, we need to go back to the beginning here, because this is a little bit awkward because it's the way it's set up, but it's all organized geographically. So when we get here, then we have all the different places, and so we swing down to all the counties. So we swing down to Washington County. And then we have places within, and we see there's Greenwich. And there's 32 more records, baptisms, religious records. So all of these records still need to be searched.
Oh,
Anything that
wow.
falls in that time frame, which is just about everything we've got going. Well, it's not quite early enough to get some baptismal records, but we don't think that because William was born before Greenwich became a place, then he was obviously not born there. Okay,
Okay. Well,
that's kind
John,
of
so
what's.
James, are you feeling like you're still kind of shoring up your information on what you already have before taking that leap back to Lydia's grandparents? Is that
Well, yeah, in a sense, because I need to I need to find some more specific records. We have a church record that shows that Lydia was parents were William and Amy, and so we have some things to go on, but this is a work in progress, and it's one of the projects that I've had going. I got a little bit distracted on this project because I went out to some other relatives that come along the same line and started finding a whole bunch of information. So since this one's been so hard, it's kind of like picking away piece by piece and trying to
mm-hmm.
put it all together. And the other one is like, wow, there's like 20 people, So it just, I'll get back to this pretty shortly.
Very
Okay.
cool. Okay. All right. Thanks, James.
Thanks.